The Razer Viper Mini has been out for a while now, and as a result has had plenty of time. That's not gonna work. The Razer Viper Mini has been out for quite some time now, and as a while has had plenty of time to cement itself in the lightweight gaming mice market. However, with so many options available, how can you know if this is the right one for you? In this review, I'm going to try to help you decide. Stay tuned. Today's video sponsor is Ecomax Microwaves, the official microwave of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Ecomax microwaves are reliable products that heat your food 50% of the time and only take twice as long as the suggested cooking time. Ecomax, microwaves that sound like a jet engine. Get yours today. Okay, so first I want to start this review with kind of an overview, similar to last video, of previous products I've used in this segment. And so the very first mouse that I used when I transitioned to PC gaming was the mouse that came with my pre-built. Of course, that was really low quality, and after only a few weeks of using that, I quickly wanted to upgrade. And so after doing some research, one of the really popular mice at the time was the Zowie FK2. This was in early 2018, like summer of 2018, I think, to early 2018. And yeah, then that was one of the top dogs as far as like small to medium gaming mice was concerned. You know, back then Zowie was king, and everybody was using their mice, and so that's what I went for. And I used that for quite a while. But then when they released the S2, I switched to that because you know, the shape definitely fit better. It was a similar shape, about the same length, but it had a more pronounced hump in the back, whereas the FK is a very flat shape. So yeah, then I switched to that, used that for a while. And then my first you know, lightweight mouse that I got into was the Cooler Master MM710. And that I got in the fall of 2019, I think, yeah, like fall 2019. And that was a really great performer. I mean, I enjoyed using all of those mice, but switching to something that was like 20 grams lighter at first was definitely a transition, but after getting used to it, I could definitely see the benefits. And then after that, I really liked the MM710's shape, but I felt it was just a tad wide maybe. And so really the only other option available at the time was the glorious Model O minus, right? If you wanted something skinnier. And so I used that for a while, and now I'm using the Viper Mini because of some issues I had with the Model O minus, which I'll get into in a little bit. Anyways, so you know, first thing, you're gonna take this mice out of the box, and if you're like me and you came from using other lightweight mice, one of the immediate things you're going to notice, you know, is that due to the fact that it's a lightweight mouse that doesn't have any holes, the build quality is just incredible compared to those mice, right? Because it's a solid shell. Whereas if I did this, pushing in on the top and the bottom on one of those other mice, you would get a lot of creaking, and you might feel like you're even going to break it. And if you press on the sides, the side buttons might activate, but no, absolutely. This thing is absolutely rock solid. And also, however, while the physical build is really nice, and you know, the buttons themselves feel pretty good, they are using Razer's optomechanical switches, so they're not quite as good as like typical Omrons or whatever. They don't feel quite as clicky, but honestly, you don't really notice it. But here, I'll just give you a listen to them so you can determine you can get an idea of how they're going to feel. So. Those are the left and right clicks, middle mouse. and the side buttons. And the side buttons are really well tensioned. There's very little post travel after you press them in, a little bit more in the rear than in the front. And the clicks don't really have any post travel. It's just, they're slightly more mushy than typical mechanical switches. And the middle mouse button is a pretty standard feeling weight. And then the scroll wheel, it's pretty quiet. It's a little bit louder than like a glorious scroll wheel, but it was definitely quieter than the MM710 scroll wheel and way quieter than a Zowie scroll wheel, but pretty much everything is. And then let's move on to the cable. So the cable that comes with is pretty good. I would say out of the MM710, the Malo Minus, and this probably has the worst cable out of the three. I'm talking about like Glorious's new generation cables. This would probably be the worst, but not by much. It is a little bit stiffer. I'll see if I can get the mouse to, yeah, like you can see, like whereas other cables would kind of bunch up and not cause the mouse to move, this kind of does. You know, it just doesn't have as much slack. The MM710 has a fantastic cable. Like I would see no reason to get a paracord after that or something like that. And then this is only like slightly worse than the Malo Minus cable, but it is something to keep in mind. And one of the things you can do is you can like pinch the cable and run it towards the mouse, and that'll take up a lot of the slack and put it closer to the mouse, and then that helps a little bit. But it's still good though, and in a bungee, I don't really notice it at all. Okay, moving on next. The shape of this mouse is honestly amazing. Like it's so good. The reason I originally switched from the Malo Minus to the MM710 was because the MM710 is similar in shape to this, slightly shorter, slightly wider, slightly taller. It has a little bit of a bigger hump in the back, right? And I thought I liked all of those dimensions. I like the really short because I use like a hybrid fingertip grip. And so I like having that pocket in the back that you can pull the mouse into when you're like controlling recoil in an FPS or something. I really like that, but I just felt that the mouse was a little bit too wide, and I felt I wasn't being as dexterous as I could with it. So the Malo Minus was decently a little slimmer in the waist than the MM710. But the problem with the Malo Minus is it's an extremely flat mouse, right? It's like, it's got a good like 4 millimeters, I'd say, of height difference between the MM710 and then like 3 between this. And so the problem is, unless if you're like a pure fingertip gripper and you don't get any support from the underside of your knuckles on the mouse, then it would be fine. But I like resting this part of my hand on the back of the mouse, and I just really couldn't get any support from the Malo Minus because the hump was so small. And so when I saw this shape, it's pretty much a compromise between the MM710 and the Malo Minus, and the shape just really works out quite perfectly for me. The height isn't too offensive, so if you are a fingertip grip, it's not going to be interfering with you. It's not so short that if you were to, like a claw gripper or something, you know, you couldn't like get some support on the back of the palm, because the MM710 is like a few millimeters short, but it's not so long that if you're a fingertip gripper, you don't get to pull the mouse back into that little pocket. And so I really think the shape is a perfect compromise between the two, and it fits my hand better than either of those. But of course, that's entirely subjective. So if you're a pure fingertip gripper, the Malo might be better. If you really like claw, then the MM710 might be better just because of that big hump in the back. But as far as like widely recognized shapes go, the Malo Minus is similar to the FK series. It's like a smaller FK2. This is like a smaller S2. And then the MM710 is like a smaller ZA series mouse, right? So maybe like the ZA13, I think, is the smallest in that line. So yeah, as far as shape goes, really good shape. I think it's a really safe shape because it doesn't go to that like either extreme like the MM710 does, and which is ironic because they're only a few millimeters apart, but it does make a big difference. So yeah, really good shape. And then as far as performance in game is concerned, I out of the three, this technically is the worst sensor. It goes up to the lowest DPI. Not like it matters. It's like 8400 or something, but you shouldn't be using above 800 anyways, really. And then it also has the highest liftoff distance, which I saw a lot of people complain about on the internet. So I don't know if it's mouse pad dependent, but on my MP510 mouse pad, it works perfectly fine. And I play at a pretty low sense in most games, so I'm always lifting up my mouse, and I don't really notice it at all. So I don't know. I think it's just nitpicking by people personally, or they see the stat like on a manufacturer's sheet, and they think it's going to be bad because of that, and they haven't actually used it. But to each their own. I can just say from my experience, I haven't had any problems with liftoff distance and tracking in that regard. The Model O- has a 3360. The MM710 has a 3389. And this has like a 3359, I think, or something. Or it's like, it's not like a Razer made sensor, but they brand it a weird way. But if anybody tells you that they could tell the difference between the three sensors, they're lying. So don't worry, shape is so much more important than any minute differences between the sensors, and that's really what you should be worrying about. But one of the things that I was worried about getting this mouse was having to install Synapse on my computer, right? Which you don't have to, but I mean, I try to avoid like bloaty software as much as possible. And Synapse would probably be like one of the big cons of this mouse, honestly, because whereas like with the Glorious mouse and the MM710, with their softwares, after you set all your settings, you can delete the software if you want to, and it'll still save all the profiles locally to the mouse. But this, I think it saves everything except for like lighting. So if you don't have the software, it'll just revert to that RGB barf cycle. So I would say, like, I don't know, if you don't care about the lighting or whatever, if you're fine just keeping on Rainbow, just don't even bother with the software. But also, while you're installing it, you can just uncheck like all the boxes except the basic Synapse, and then be fine with that. Because like it asks you to like install Alexa on your computer and all this like random bull crap, and so just be careful when you're installing that, because if you check like every box, which almost all of them are by default, it takes up like 2 gigabytes or something ridiculous. So I don't know, I see Synapse as kind of a downside, even though it has like lots of features, but you know, you don't have to download it to use the mouse. So I guess I was kind of unfair on it in that aspect, but they could definitely do better. And then I would say, kind of to close, I would say that out of the MM710, the Model O-, and the Viper Mini, this is going to be the safest mouse for most people, okay? The shape is kind of a hybrid of the two. It's very similar to like larger mice like the Viper, or, well, obviously like the full-size Viper, or like the Model O, just slightly scaled down, versus some of the more extreme shapes like the Model O-, where it's very flat, or the MM710 where it's kind of wide and tall in the back. And as a result, I think a lot of people could transition from larger mice to this no problem, whereas I think transitioning from larger mice to the Model O- would be pretty difficult. And then MM710, really, it's more dependent on hand shape. But this, I think, is the safest shape out of the three. And also, it's a safer choice because if you're like hesitant about, you know, having holes in your mouse or something, you think it's gonna bother you. Me personally, it never did, but I know some people who say they do. So if you're kind of worried about that, you don't have to make that compromise with this. You still get a 60-gram mouse and it has no holes in it, which is pretty incredible when you think about it. And then another point of comparison between the three mice, the feet. This has, I think they're 100% PTFE feet, or they might be pretty close to that, but these are very fast feet. I would say out of the three, the Model O-, the MM710, and this, I would say in terms of the feet speed, it would be MM710, then Model O-, then this. They're all pretty close, but this definitely has the fastest out of the three, so that's something to keep in mind. That's just what I noticed, because I've used the same mouse pad with all three of them, the MP510, so that's one of the things I noticed. But yeah, so to conclude, I think this is a really great mouse. You know, it's awesome that Razer is able to put something out like this at $40, because most of the time, you know, you suffer from that like Razer tax where the products are priced considerably higher than their competitors. And really my only complaint, and the only thing I think they could really improve on, is come out with a Viper Mini Ultimate. That would probably be that would be pretty much an end game mouse for me, I can say for sure, because you know, Glorious is coming out with the Model O wireless, so I can expect the Model O minus wireless to follow, but I can't. This shape is just so much better for me personally than the Model O minus that I can't really see myself switching to the Model O minus wireless, and I think it would be a really, really stupid decision by Razer to not come out with a Viper Mini Ultimate at around the same time or before the Model O minus wireless comes out. So I'm really hoping that they'll do that, but you know, we'll see what happens. Anyways, thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. I stream during the weekdays and I post a review every weekend. This has been Barden Hick, signing out.